On behalf of the Simon School and Meet the GMAT, we're glad to have you here today. Today's webinar is entitled, Which Round Should I Apply? Advice on When to Hit Submit. And we're going to go through and give some great perspective from the admissions committee. And it'll be mostly general advice, so maybe a little bit sprinkled in specifically about Simon, but the goal is that you'll have understanding of both some of the strategic perspective to consider when you're positioning your application for admission, but also some of the tactical decisions that you'll need to make as you go through the process. As I mentioned, I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions and Student Engagement, and I provided my contact information so that if you're interested in following up with me after today's session, I'd be happy to touch bases with you individually. When we get to the end of today's session, we will do Q&A, and some of that will probably be more individual. But a lot of it may be broad-based. So to the extent to which the questions, I'm sorry, my PowerPoint isn't advancing on its own, so I apologize for that. I guess my mouse has a mind of its own. But in any sense, I wanted to give you a little bit about my background so you understand the vantage point from which I'm approaching our conversation today. I've worked in higher education for more than 15 years, and I've been with the business school at University of Rochester for just over 15 years. And I'm also a graduate of the MBA program at the University of Rochester. And so I bring both an understanding from going through an MBA and understanding from sitting on the admissions committee for many, many years as to what an admissions committee is going to be looking for in candidates and what we would like to see when a candidate comes through the application process. And hopefully that'll translate into you preparing a successful application and ultimately gaining admission. And what I tell candidates quite frequently is that, our goal as admissions officers is to help you to be competitive. That's a win-win if you can present yourself in a competitive light. And so if today's session helps you to prepare and approach that successfully, then we have been successful in our goals as a school. I shared a little bit of our tagline with you just to help you understand that the very reason that you're choosing to join today's session is because you're coming at the goal of improving yourself with an understanding that you're going to need additional skills to be competitive in the future business landscape. And so with that, we'll jump right into today's agenda. As I said, we're going to give an admissions committee perspective, very broad, general perspective. We're going to walk through what the differences are in some of the application rounds, and I've chosen 3 rounds just because a lot of schools do have 3 rounds. I realize some have 4 or even 5, and so we'll talk through what some of that looks like. But for the most part, we're going to focus on broadly an early round, which in some cases is already passed, a round that's probably in the December-January timeframe, and a round that is in the springtime. And it doesn't really matter, quite frankly, what the exact dates are of those application rounds. What more broadly is important is how those rounds overlap each other and where an admissions committee typically is operating based on that time of the year and what those various trade-offs look like to you as a candidate. We're going to talk kind of briefly about what's going to be right for you in that decision making and in terms of when to apply, and ultimately trying to take as many questions and answers as we can as you go through the process as well. Okay, so admissions committee perspective. There's going to be a variety of different things that the admissions committee is going to be looking at in terms of your candidacy, and all of these different things are going to be important if you're looking to gain admission to a top business school. It's going to be a holistic approach, but at the end of the day, these schools will have many candidates who apply to their program, and not all of them are going to be competitive. I'm apologizing for the technical difficulties. I've run webinars many times, and I'm not quite sure why my PowerPoint is advancing when I'm not even touching the computer, so please bear with me. But we're going to be looking at all of these different factors listed below, and I'm going to talk through each of them very briefly. One is academic preparedness, and so we're going to be looking at your undergraduate record and your standardized test scores to make a decision on whether you can handle the academic rigor of one of our programs. That's typically one of the very, very first things and probably one of the easiest things that an admissions committee is going to be looking at. but it's by no means the only thing. It's probably one of the easiest things for you as a candidate to compare yourself against is, the academic profile of the school you're considering. And it will be one thing that you should be considering when you're deciding what round to apply, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's all of these other different aspects of the application that are going to be equally, or in some cases even more important than just your academic profile. There's plenty of strong academic candidates that are not admitted to a school, and there's candidates that have average to even below average academic profiles who are admitted. And so things like your leadership potential, your team skills, your communication skills are all qualitative aspects of your application that are going to be supremely important for you to demonstrate in your application, and that could be through your interview, it could be through your essays, through your recommendations, but it's going to be very important for you to demonstrate those things. Another very important thing for you to demonstrate is going to be your career goals and ambitions, and that's typically, again, through essays and through your interview that you'll be doing, providing some context of where you've come from and where you want to go. There's also this nebulous thing called fit that admissions committees are absolutely assessing. Fit for the program that you're applying to, fit for the career plan that you're looking to pursue, fit for the kind of student that they're typically attracting, and both fit in terms of are you similar to some of the students, but also to some extent are you different. They're looking for kind of this balance between students that are different from one another that can add to the value in the classroom experience, but also enough similarity in candidates that that you'll have some things in common with each other. And so that's always kind of a delicate balance. We're looking for well-rounded candidates. That probably goes without saying, but this is going to be important for you to demonstrate in terms of community involvement or extracurricular activities or hobbies or interests. We're not just looking for students that are very focused in work or that had strong academic performance, but also what makes you unique and interesting as an individual. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're not enrolling a class profile. We're also enrolling students, and so we want to make sure that those students are going to be successful and contributing classmates and community members in the business school experience. When I talk about class mix, ultimately we're not only enrolling individuals in a program, but we're also enrolling an entire class. And so we do, as we work through the application rounds, start to pay more attention to the big picture of what does the class look like. It's not just what does each individual candidate bring to the table, but what does our overall enrolling class look like. We're not looking to enroll an entire class of engineers, neither are we looking to enroll an entire class from one particular country or one particular academic discipline, and so that then becomes a delicate balancing act as well as we move through the rounds. What I will say, though, as we start the conversation is that all things being equal, you should apply early. What you'll realize, though, as we begin to talk through this, is that all things aren't equal, and so there's certain aspects of your application that might be quite strong or that are very well prepared in advance, and other things that may not be, and so you need to go into that process understanding the trade-offs and what will ultimately hopefully end up with a successful admission to a program. So that's a little bit of context on the admissions committee. I just wanted to start the conversation there so that you understand what we're going to be looking at, and that will then help you to understand how things may differ by rounds. So we have, like I said, broadly 3 rounds of application, and it could be 4 or even could be 5. But what you'll find is that the first 2 rounds are probably different from some of the latter rounds. Typically, candidates that are coming into round 1 and are really ready to apply for round 1 have spent a considerable amount of time with their preparation. They have probably spent a minimum of 8 to 12 months working through their research on business schools, their GMAT or GRE preparation, their intention in exploring the business school application process. And so you need to take stock in how strong your profile is relative to the class profile for the schools that you're considering. That's an important decision to make in terms of whether or not you're ready to apply in round 1. You will see some candidates who may not have the strongest academic profile who are admitted in round 1. Obviously, they're bringing a number of other things to the table. if they are offered admission. But at the same time, what you'll also find is that if you're applying round one and you aren't as competitive, you also need to make a decision and an assessment and ultimately a decision about whether or not you could be a stronger candidate if you were to wait until round two. And so that's where I said strategically you need to understand how you're positioned and really understand how your candidacy is similar or different to other candidates that are going to be applying into the program that you're interested in. If you do apply round one, you're certainly going to send a signal to the admissions committee of your commitment to the school and your interest in the school. And certainly that's important. It's not going to erase a ill-prepared application or an uncompetitive application. But if, like I said, all things being equal, you are ready to go, submitting an early application is going to send a strong signal to the admissions committee. Again, and we'll talk about this more later, applying late also may send a different signal to the admissions committee, and so something to be keeping in mind. Round one, every single seat is available, and so there's statistically a stronger chance of being offered an admission to the program. There's a lot more admission offers that will be made because there are seats to be filled, but the admissions committee in many cases is also operating without full information. They don't know what the entire applicant pool is going to look like. They're only a portion of the applications that have been received relative to the entire pool that they're expecting. And so there's also a higher probability of being put on the wait list, quite frankly, than the later rounds because the admissions committee is operating without full information. If you apply early, there's also a greater possibility for you to execute a plan B if, say, you're not admitted in round one, if you're either waitlisted or rejected. So something, again, tactically to keep in mind, and also to kind of stage what schools are you going to apply to in round one versus round two, or can you handle a full bandwidth of applying to mini programs straight out of the gate? You know, you kind of want to understand what's your contingency going to be if you don't get admitted to all schools, or if you get waitlisted, and you know, so there's not a one-size-fits-all here. So you're going to want to carefully look at the admission application deadlines for the various schools that you're shortlisting. But again, a lot of this comes down to understanding where you're potentially a fit for particular schools. What schools do you feel you have a high likelihood of being admitted to versus a average or even a below average? You know, where are your stretch schools? And you know, being pretty honest about, you know, where you think you fit, and that takes time in terms of developing that list of schools and determining realistically how likely is it that you can put forward a strong application, and it's probably not likely just from a bandwidth standpoint that you're going to be able to execute all of those applications for round one deadlines. And so what makes sense for round one versus, you know, round two. And there's even some schools, Simon being one of them, that will review applications mid-round. And so that potentially is a possibility of sneaking a few applications in there as you're working through managing those deadlines of which schools, you know, could you stage a mid-round application to, knowing that your application would immediately be processed and evaluated by the admissions committee if it's submitted mid-round. What you'll also find from a scholarship standpoint is that applying early does pay. You know, obviously, you need to be a competitive applicant if you're going to ultimately be not only admitted but also awarded a scholarship. But those scholarship deadlines tend to be early, first round, second round, priority for scholarships, period, or sometimes scholarships at higher levels. And so look real closely at those scholarship deadlines. Even if they have later round deadlines, they also have scholarship budgets. And so to the extent that not only admission offers have been made, but also scholarships offers have been made from early rounds, there's just going to be a smaller pool of scholarship funding that's available for later deadlines. If you are an absolutely superior candidate in a late round, there very well may be a possibility that you'll be admitted, but there's and even offered a scholarship. But again, those chances begin to dwindle as you move through the application round. So keep all of that in mind. And so round one, again, if you're looking at a really long lead time and you are really prepared, then that can be a great opportunity for you. But again, there's also great opportunities in round two and in round three. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. Round two. So round two is probably going to be a December, January time frame for a round two application. One of the benefits of a round 2 application is that you can probably structure some campus visits around your application submission, and so that can actually help you to really craft a competitive fit message, which is, why am I applying to your school and why would I be a great candidate for your school? And so something to keep in mind, and that would be hopefully to your benefit, that you can craft a stronger message because you have had an opportunity to visit the school, you've had an opportunity to sit in on class, you've had an opportunity to talk candidly with some current students about what their experience has been like, and hopefully not only has that reinforced your desire to attend that school, but you're also in a position of being able to communicate effectively why you would be a great candidate. It also can help as you're preparing for your interview, that you have stronger messaging around why you would be a great candidate for that school during the interviewing process. However, there is a lot of competition. Typically round 2, or the December-January timeline, is a popular time for students to be applying to school. And so whether it be taking some vacation around the holidays to work on your applications, or a New Year's resolution to get your business school application submitted, or a variety of other factors. Round 2 tends to be a big round where the majority of applications are going to be submitted. What you'll probably find is that the majority of seats that need to be filled will probably be filled by the end of round 2 decisions. There's also going to be probably fewer waitlist decisions that are issued for round 2 because most schools have a pretty good idea about what their candidate pool looks like. And so again, as schools get more information about what their candidate pool looks like overall, they have a better sense of how you individually fit with that school. And so they're more readily able to make an up or down decision. And again, if you're not admitted, the chances are you might be actually denied as opposed to waitlisted for a school. For some of you who may be doing some non-degree coursework this fall, round 2 can be a great chance to submit a transcript for that non-degree coursework, and that could be evaluated with your application to business school, as opposed to just saying, I'm actually taking a course. You can actually say, I actually received XYZ grade in a course. And so that's, again, additional information, which if you've been out of school a while, or perhaps didn't do as well in undergrad as you were hoping, or maybe had a less quantitative background, those would all be reasons why taking non-degree coursework might be a good idea. There's still going to be plenty of time for you to plan your transition to business school if you're ultimately admitted in round 2, whereas applying later in the year will probably give less time. You also probably still have a reasonably good amount of time to evaluate your decision if you're offered admission, whereas if you apply in one of the late rounds, you'll probably, in the springtime, you may only have a week or 2 to evaluate that admission offer and ultimately make a decision. So there's still typically some visit events for admitted students that you'll be invited to if you are applying for round 2, which can also be helpful in terms of meeting some of your potential future classmates. And if you hadn't already been to campus for your interview, giving you a chance to check out the city and the business school campus to make the most informed decision possible. It'll also give you enough time to still relocate and quit your job and make that transition a real positive experience. And there's typically still scholarship support that's available for round 2 candidates, but you'll probably find that there's more of a difference between round 2 and round 3. But there may be certain scholarships at certain levels which become more competitive even at round 2, because like I said, there are a lot of candidates applying in round 2, and so standing out from other candidates is going to be important. And so the way that you should approach your application is standing out in the right kinds of ways. You don't want to stand out in a negative sort of way. You want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and really showing what sort of value you would bring to the business school experience that might be different from other candidates, might be unique, might be special, because ultimately we want you to look at this application process not in terms of what the school can do for you, but what can you do for the school. And that's an important mind shift that you need to be thinking about as you're exploring and preparing for your applications. A lot of times students are looking at this as very self-serving in terms of what kind of job can I get from it going to this business school, or what kind of network will I get from enrolling. And those are all great benefits, but ultimately for a competitive business school, you want to show what you're bringing to the table. And just like an employment offer, you want to, an employer wants to know what are you bringing to the table. They don't want to know what they're going to do for you, even though they will certainly do things for you in terms of training and development and career advancement. They ultimately want you to be able to show and sell yourself. Why are you going to be able to contribute to that organization? So think about that in your application and really try to think about what you would bring that's unique or special. And a lot of this is on the qualitative side because you're going to have a GMAT score that's similar to a lot of other candidates, and you're going to have an academic record that may be similar to some other candidates or years of work experience that's similar to other candidates. But what unique qualities, what unique strengths, skill sets, that would really add value, and what is your intention for involvement as a business school student or as a business school alum? And those sorts of things are typically predicted by past behavior and involvement. So if you're not already involved in your community, that those are investments that you certainly should consider making so that you're going to really maximize your ability to add value in the business school once you're enrolled as a student. Okay. Application rounds. Let's talk a little bit about round 3 because that's, again, going to be a possibility for some of you. And keeping in mind, if you have a less competitive academic profile and you need to retake your GMATs, or if there's other parts of your application that you're still working on, submitting a sloppy application for round 2 just because there's going to be fewer spots available does not make sense. You really need to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and you're able to make a hard decision if you're not ready to apply, that you are able to put pause, press pause on your application and, really make sure that you're approaching this in a very intentional way. It's a hard decision to make because you're excited about business school, but at the end of the day, you want a positive outcome. And so the goal here today is to give you advice that will ultimately lead to a successful outcome. So round 3 is typically spring admission, spring application, spring admission, February, March timeframe. There still are seats available, but there's not many. Schools have already put a lot of offers out there to candidates, and they're starting to hear about who's enrolling and who's not enrolling. And so they have a sense of how many seats are still available, whether or not there's any financial aid that's left on the table. You're also going to be competing with the wait list, and so you need to understand that they're going to be looking for a certain kind of candidate, certain backgrounds, not a very generic profile of student. You don't necessarily have to, be an Olympic athlete, but or something of that caliber. But you're going to want to bring something really special or unique to the table, and so you want to be thinking about that as you go into round 3. And what makes you special. You also need to be prepared to answer why are you applying round 3. And like I said, the psychology around that could be presumed by the admissions committee in terms of, is this a backup? If you are intentionally applying round 3 and there's reasons why you are waiting because you knew that you weren't competitive earlier, or maybe your circumstances changed and you're accelerating a business school application process, say because you're changing career trajectory. Sometimes individuals may have been passed over for a promotion, or there's other personal reasons that are causing you to elevate your career transition, maybe a spouse that relocated or things like that. That's important information for the admissions committee to know. Nobody wants, even though admissions committees know that you're applying to multiple business schools, they don't want to feel like they're second choice. And so, that's something that you need to figure out. How are you going to position yourself as a round 3 candidate so that you don't appear to be a second choice? And so we'll talk a little bit in a minute about how do you position all of your different applications so that you don't end up with that situation where you're going to school saying, well, you really aren't my first choice and I need more time with another school that I apply to, because that does not sound good to an admissions committee, and you want to avoid that if at all possible. So use the optional essay. Most schools have an optional essay. Use the optional essay and be prepared. Proactively address why are you applying round 3. And it doesn't need to be a long, drawn-out, 4-page essay about how great that school is. But just very succinctly let us know why did you wait, and why do you feel that you're still competitive as a round 3 candidate. And there may be very good reasons, but we would like to know what those are. I already talked a little bit about competing for the wait list and scholarships, but again, ultimately, if you're super excited about the school that you're applying to and you're a great fit for that school, and you've been careful in preparing for your finances, scholarship may not be as much of an issue for you in your decision making about which school to attend. I provided a little bit about our business school application deadlines only to help you understand, like I said, staging-wise, when are these application deadlines and how do they typically look. The last deadline in May is only for U.S. candidates, and it's a very, very, less than 10% of our applicant pool. So typically you're looking at the November, January, March, and like I said, sometimes for a school it's, you're staging within, 2 to 4 weeks plus or minus of these particular deadlines. But then they're also going to be positioning when are you going to hear from the school and whether scholarships are available. And even though we answer yes in the category box for scholarships available, I will tell you our largest scholarships are cut off for students that apply after January. They're much more modest if you're applying later. It's a budgetary issue. We just don't have unlimited funds, and so we will prioritize for students that have prioritized their application. So the proverbial early bird does get the worm, so to speak, when it comes to funding, and that's pretty consistent across top business schools. You're not going to find a lot of variation there. We're operating like a business, and we want to make sure that we're getting the best possible candidates, and so we're not going to leave a lot of money on the table hoping somebody applies later. We're going to make sure that we're doing our very best to recruit the students that we want most to join our programs. Okay, what's going to be right for you? Let's talk a little bit about that. We'll be moving to Q&A probably in just about 5 to 7 minutes. So if you haven't already started formulating your questions, please do that, and we'll be facilitating answers to as many of them as we possibly can. I will say that we're going to do our best to answer the general questions first, as opposed to, here's my profile, evaluate me for when I should apply. But I'll answer questions about the entire admissions process. So to the extent to which there's other things relating to advice on business school and the application process, I'll do my best to answer those for you as well. But what's going to be right for you, this is different for every single candidate. It starts with school research and fit. You need to know yourself. You need to know why you would be a good fit for a particular school. And not just, certainly things like rankings and geography are going to weigh into the decision making, but those cannot be the only reasons that you're applying to a particular school. You're going to need to dig deeper than that in terms of career fit and culture fit for a school and programmatic fit. So think about all those sorts of things. I think one of the best things to do is talk to alumni and current students, and so networking is certainly going to be a big part of it. Another thing that's going to determine whether or not you're ready to apply for a certain round is, have you taken your GRE or your GMAT yet, and are you happy with that score? And you may be happy with that score for certain schools, but not for other schools. And so be honest with yourself about how far are you going to stretch yourself in terms of time and preparation for a GRE or GMAT by rushing to get some applications submitted versus getting your score to a place where it's competitive for all the schools that you're considering. And so the GRE or GMAT will keep you in the ballgame with certain schools. It's not going to be the be-all or end-all in terms of if you're going to be admitted or denied, but it keeps you in the ballgame, and you don't want to miss being in the ballgame because of a GRE or GMAT score. And your entire academic profile, for that matter, again, is going to keep you in the ballgame, but to the extent to which you might need some non-degree business coursework, that, again, may be a factor in terms of whether or not 2014 is within the realm of possibility for you, or whether or not you need to be looking a little bit later, or if you need to be applying to a later round, because there's some coursework that's going to be essential for you to be able to demonstrate your capabilities to handle the academic rigor of a top business school. There's also a lot of time that you're going to need to budget for essay preparation. I think even though some schools have reduced the number of essays that they're requiring, there's still probably at least 2 to 3 essays per school, and if you're applying to anywhere between 3 and 5 schools, those essay topics are different. They're not the same boilerplate sort of essays where you can just do a statement of purpose and you're done. These are multi-part essay questions, and you need to make sure that you're approaching them with the level of thoughtfulness that the committee is going to be looking for. And so not an area to gloss over or save for the last minute. You're going to probably want to look at a few iterations of essay review, and possibly even including somebody close to you to provide some feedback on your essays. There's also pretty long lead times for recommendation letters. Do not think that you're going to be able to ask your recommenders to submit recommendations on 1 week notice. That is absolutely not going to happen, even for somebody who loves you and wants to say great things about you. And so you need to be budgeting, much longer lead times, weeks, if not months, and sitting down and taking people out for coffee or lunch and really showing intention about why you're pursuing this process, especially if they're going to be writing a few recommendations. If you're applying to several schools, this is going to be a lengthy process for them if they're writing recommendations for you for several of these schools that you're applying to. And so you do want to make sure that their response is reflective of the great candidate that you are. You don't want that to be saved for the last minute and all of a sudden you're rushing through that process with them and they end up providing a really short, sparse recommendation that doesn't reflect the level of detail that we would like to see as an admissions committee. So please, please give long lead times. You also need to decide, is scholarship support really important for funding your studies, or are you prepared to finance that through loans or on your own? Because that will really determine and drive, is it imperative for you to submit an early application? It also probably will drive the tier of schools that you're looking at, because you can certainly get admitted and get a scholarship to a less competitive business school even in a later round. But you need to decide, is that something that you're okay with? Is geography more important to you, or are there other factors that are going to be important as you're making the decision? And I don't dismiss the funding part of it. I mean, business school is very expensive. There is a strong return on your investment, but it is a financial commitment that you're making. And so you need to get your mind around, are you okay with enrolling in business school if you have to fund a majority of it on your own? And so if that's the case, then applying second or third round is something that could still be feasible for you and getting admitted to a really good school. You also need to figure out, how are you going to stage these applications to different schools, because I don't meet many students that apply to only one school. There's probably a few of you out there, but a lot of students are applying to multiple schools, and you're trying to figure out, how do I make sure I get admitted to at least 1 or 2 schools that I'm really excited about, but not offend any other schools that I might also be interested in, but maybe aren't my very first choice? And how do I make sure that I end up getting an admission offer and not ending up with, kind of spreading myself so thin that I submit several applications that are sloppy and, not my best work, and, then ultimately end up with no admission offers, So you want to make sure that you're developing a contingency plan. And so, again, laying out these different application deadlines very carefully and with some strategy is going to be important, so that you end up with, the financial package and the admission offer that you're looking for. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. We don't have, students that are always applying to the same set of business schools at the same time and with the same profiles. So you need to look at all of these things and really be honest with yourself, And if you can do that, then I'm sure that you're going to be competitive as a candidate when you go through this process. Again, we're here for you if you have questions. I provided my personal email at the beginning. We have online FAQs. We do webinars that provide very specific admission tips. And there's webinar archives as well. And there's also on-campus events, all of these designed to help you be a competitive applicant. What we'd like to do now is move into a time of Q&A. And again, like I stated at the very beginning, we're going to take as many of these questions as we can. Please go ahead and ask your questions, and we will get to as many of them as we can. And if you have individual questions, save them for the end, or feel free to email me those questions, and we can take that offline and talk individually about your personal background and your plans for business school and how you can be a competitive applicant, especially to the Simon Business School. Okay, here. In question number 1, in each round, are there particular slots seat to international students or local students? Yes and no, and this is kind of a forest and trees sort of question. We're not looking to enroll, all students from one particular region of the world, or all students from one particular industry or function, or all students one particular gender. But there's not a quota You know, it's all going to be dependent on the caliber of students that are applying for that round and the number of students that are applying that round. So it's kind of one of those it depends sort of questions. It depends on the applicant pool. But broadly speaking, we are looking to enroll a class mix that is diverse, but that is something that you as a candidate are going to be excited about when you show up to enroll and begin orientation. We want you to be excited about your classmates. We want you to be excited about their backgrounds. And so it's always, we approach the admissions process with diversity in the back of our minds, but diversity is very broad, and it's going to depend on the applicant pool. And so it's kind of like a moving average, so to speak, in terms of what that group of students is going to look like, and it's actually quite exciting for admissions. I can speak very candidly that we get excited when we start to meet the students that will become part of the future of the business school. But we don't know what that looks like at the beginning, and even in round one. So that's a moving average that evolves and develops as we go through the application process in terms of, how do students do when they go through the interview process, how do students respond to us if we make an offer to them. And so that, as it evolves, we make more informed decisions about where we will still have space and who are the kind of candidates we're still looking for. But it's more of an art than a science. It's not something where I begin the pool or the year and say, okay, I have X seats for international or X seats for domestic. It's not quite that quantitative. It's definitely more of an art. Okay, question number 2, how important is it to have work experience? Well, that depends on what schools you're looking at. There are some schools that have either a mandatory work experience requirement or an unspoken mandatory work experience requirement, both in terms of you need to have experience or you need to have X years of experience. I will say that the majority of students that are applying to a top business school probably have some experience, but there's also some schools, Simon being one of them, that is open-minded, and a small portion of our enrolling class each year has limited full-time experience after their bachelor's degree. Now, some of those students have military experience pre-baccalaureate. Some of those students have had, the ability to jockey running their own business or substantial internships while they were in undergrad, or maybe even stopped out of undergrad to pursue a career. So, you want to find schools that are a good match for your level and type of work experience, as well as your career expectations. That's very, very important. That's part of that whole fit process. And so if you find that you don't have a lot of work experience, you need to orient yourself to schools that are open-minded to considering your candidacy, that it's not about a number of years of experience, but it's more about the quality and type of work experience you've had that would allow you to be a competitive candidate. Ultimately, like I said, schools are looking at what are you bringing to the table and what sort of unique experiences will add value to your classmates and make you a valuable and contributing member to the program. And so if there's ways that you can demonstrate that even with less working experience, then I would encourage you to think about how you position in your resume, your recommendation letters, and ultimately your interview to be able to demonstrate that. So don't be intimidated by the process. There's still some great schools out there that would be interested in your candidacy, and you're going to need to figure out where is the intersection between your background and schools that would be excited about that. Okay, this next question, I'm not sure if I completely understand it, but we'll try to walk through it, is how do you manage preparing recommenders when you can only access the questions once you apply online? Is there a way around this? So what you're going to find with recommenders is that it's typically a blind process for you as a candidate. You will not be able to see what they're being asked. And that doesn't happen, I mean, that regardless of how far along you are in the application process, that is typically the case. Most schools do not want you to significantly contribute to answering those questions. They're expecting that this is going to be a third-party perspective of your candidacy. That being said, there's still plenty of ways that you can help prepare recommenders so that you will ultimately allow your best foot to be put forward as they're helping to showcase your capabilities. One is to be careful about how you choose your recommenders. These need to be people who know you very, very well. This isn't the CEO that you ride in the elevator with once a week with a little basic chit-chat. This is somebody that's probably your current supervisor or recent past supervisor or team leader. They can give a lot of examples of who you are as a candidate, and that can really speak to your capabilities as well as your future potential, because for a fair number of you, you're looking to change jobs. That's why you want to do an MBA. And so, you know, we need a recommender that can speak to your potential to make that transition. And so choosing your recommenders carefully is going to be important. It's not about the title that the recommender has, but more importantly about how well they know you. But treat the process very intentionally. Like I said, take them for lunch, take them for coffee, sit down with them, have a conversation about why you want to go to business school. Ask them specifically, do they have time to write a positive recommendation? So give them an out in case they just don't have the time, or God forbid they were not in a position to provide a thoroughly positive recommendation. I mean, it could be a balanced recommendation that talks about areas for development, but hopefully those are areas that are going to be developed while you're in business school. Someone that's focusing too significantly on your flaws, or that provides a very scanty recommendation, you know, just a few sentences, is actually going to be a red flag for the admissions committee. So make sure that someone has time to put a thoughtful and detailed recommendation together. You can certainly provide a past performance appraisal or a brief highlight of your accomplishments, especially more recent accomplishments. But definitely, you know, if they offer to allow you to, you know, kind of prepare something that they will then enhance, you know, you need to decline that, because there's certainly been cases over the years where it almost appears as though the candidate was writing their own recommendation letters, and you would hate to have a well-meaning recommender shortcut the process because they're short on time, and ultimately it reflects badly on you as a candidate. So you're not going to know exactly what the questions are, but I will say broadly most schools are going to allow you to upload a letter of sorts that might answer certain questions, and they're going to also ask the recommender to rate you on certain aspects. Almost all of this is related to your future potential as a individual, not just as a contributing member to society, but as an individual in the workplace. And so keeping in mind that you're probably best choosing individuals who know you in a professional capacity in terms of the kinds of questions that they're going to be needing to be prepared to answer. Question 4, what's the usual acceptance rate during round 3? I can't speak to percentages. It's going to be very different by school, and I don't know that many schools even publish it, but I can tell you it's going to be smaller on a percentage basis than round 1 or round 2, and that's, you know, that's to be expected. There's just fewer spots available, and so you need to but focus less on, well, what proportion of candidates get accepted, and more so you need to be able to answer the question of, am I a strong and competitive candidate for the school? And if you truly are, you still could be a competitive candidate for round 3. But you're going to want to be closer to the cream of the crop in terms of what you're bringing to the table, you know, and also knowing yourself well and how you fit within that school's overall profile will help you to be able to answer the question of, can you still be competitive as a round 3 candidate? Question 5, what do you consider the most important piece of the MBA admissions process? Well, I think that depends. If you're applying to a top business school, it's going to be a holistic approach. So, you know, the academic profile will get you in the game, but it's not going to ultimately get you admitted. There's plenty of students that have over 700 on the GMAT that do not get admitted to a top school. And so those other aspects of the application, the qualitative aspects, are going to be super important. Leadership potential, team skills, interpersonal skills, school fit, and what else are you contributing? You know, what makes you unique and special and different? And so you need to know yourself really well to be able to articulate that. You may bring that to the table, but if you're not successful in articulating it in terms of your value proposition, then you very well may not be admitted even if you're a great candidate. So knowing yourself and also being able to articulate that well to the admissions committee and kind of selling yourself are kind of hand in hand in terms of what you bring to the table. So, you know, ultimately though, understanding that there's some common denominators that schools are looking for in terms of drive and motivation and leadership potential and team skills and interpersonal skills, but there's also kind of diversity that they're looking for as well, and diversity of candidates and backgrounds. And so being able to show that you bring both, that you both bring some things that are unique and special and different, but also that you're someone that can play nice in the sandbox, and that you have kind of a core set of skills that is important to the school and their culture, is going to be an important balance. And so think about how you're going to be able to communicate both of those things when you go through the application process. But there's not going to be one thing that gets you admitted, neither is there going to be one thing that gets you denied typically. It's kind of the overarching themes of how well you prepared yourself and how you presented yourself, and how well you compare to the overall profile of candidates that are being considered for that school. So next question is, could you please guide us through the post-application process, example, the interview? So absolutely. First of all, know what the school's policies are. Some schools have an open interview process where just about everybody is interviewed, or it might even be a compulsory part of the application process. So please, please, please do your homework and make sure you know those deadlines and application components inside and out, because they are nuanced and they are different for each school. Also understand what the interview policy is for the school, and again, this is very nuanced. Some schools it's by invitation only, and so you will be waiting on pins and needles. And some schools release the interview invitations all on a certain day, or all on 2 or 3 different days. For some schools, it is on a rolling basis. For some schools, they also have open days where you can get yourself to campus or get yourself to a certain location, and you will be offered an interview just by raising your hand. Whereas other schools, again, it's more of at the school's invitation that you'll be offered an interview slot. And so there's some strategy. Obviously, if you are not 100% certain that you're going to be invited for an interview, you may need to kind of pre-plan some of these campus visits to ensure that you're getting an interview invitation. But it's also it's a two-way interview, so don't kid yourself that by showing up on campus that this is just for the benefit of the schools. This is to your benefit too. You can check out the facilities and meet current students, and that can really aid in your decision making if you're offered an admission spot of what did I learn during that visit, and how informing is that to me as a candidate on whether or not this is a school that I feel I would fit in with and that I would want to enroll in. Because one thing that you're probably not going to find just through web research and rankings comparisons and even casual conversations with students or alums from a distance is what's the exact personality of that school. And so a campus visit is going to do wonders for helping you to be able to make that assessment and to really feel as though the school is right for you. And many of you probably have done that at the undergraduate level and probably found that school that you felt like this was just right where I was supposed to be. And hopefully that was a school you got admitted to. But knowing that on the front end can really help you as you're making a final decision. You're also going to find after you go through the application process that you may have to navigate the wait list, or you may have some other things that will come up that are unexpected prior to a final admission decision. And so I would just say pay very close attention to what the feedback the schools give to you if you are waitlisted. There are students that get admitted off the wait list almost every single year from almost every single school from number 1 all the way down. And so a wait list is still positive. There's merit to your application, otherwise you wouldn't be waitlisted. So you want to be positive, but also find out, is there an opportunity for feedback, or what other things can you submit to support your candidacy? And so typically schools will kind of guide you through what is or is not acceptable in terms of post-submission guidelines as a waitlist candidate. And so use that as an opportunity to advocate for yourself, but make sure you're doing so within the confines of what the school suggests is appropriate. Again, you want to stand out, but in a good way. Schools can give plenty of examples where a waitlist candidate wanted to stand out, but they did so in a bad way, and that almost always is going to lead to a rejection, which is obviously not what you want. Okay, next question here, and we're getting a little bit more individually specific, but I'll still try to take a broad view here. Should one better wait for a new study year rather than apply round 3 or round 4? And
so I'll answer that part of the question. There's another part of the question that I'll wait on. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So it depends. At some point, there may be diminishing marginal returns to getting an application submitted, but there's two possibilities by submitting a late application. One is you're admitted, and so that's fantastic. And so if you know yourself well and you're a fairly competitive candidate, you can study an admission. There's a combination of timing and luck and preparedness that all ultimately converge when students get admitted. Because ultimately it's not just how competitive are you, but how do you compare to the rest of the candidate pool. And so each school admits people in round 3 and round 4. That's why we have those application rounds. So all hope is not lost if you are not ready to go in round 2. The other possibility is that you're not admitted, but there could also be some very valuable information that you learn about yourself and research that you learn about schools that ultimately would make you a better candidate when you reapply a following year. So while there is some time and sometimes expense involved in applying, if it does not lead to a successful outcome, it can we also see successful reapplications to business school each year. So I certainly wouldn't say that it's a waste of your time to submit an application for round 3 or round 4 if you are not quite sure what the outcome would be, or if you're intimidated by the idea that there's fewer spots available. I would say don't let that be an intimidation factor unless the cards are completely stacked against you. If you have a very uncompetitive application profile and you're just frankly unprepared or don't have the time to fully invest, then maybe you are better waiting for a future application year. The part B of the question is, does an aging person, 30-plus years, which I personally won't take offense from because I am 30-plus years, but does an aging person, 30-plus years, have less chances to be accepted? I think they meant to bundle that question with the first part, which is, if you're a more seasoned candidate, do you have a less chance of being admitted in a later round? Maybe, maybe not. I think this really depends on what the school profile is and what they're looking for in candidates, and again, what does your application look like? I will say the opportunity cost of waiting yet another year to put your application through probably raises with each additional year that you're in the workforce. And so, if you're looking to stop out your career, the longer you wait, the higher your current earnings and the greater the opportunity cost of waiting, and the more different your profile may look as a candidate, especially for a full-time MBA program as opposed to, say, like an executive MBA program. And so keep all of those factors in mind. And if you really feel that you bring a lot to the table, I encourage you that you could absolutely still find value in submitting an application for round 3 or even round 4. We have about 5 more minutes, so if you have more questions, feel free to submit them. We have at least a few more that are still in the queue, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. Next question. What are the chances of a candidate having 10-plus years of work experience getting admitted into round 3, assuming a 750-plus GMAT score? This is way too hard to assess, over a Q&A session for webinar. We're going to look at a lot more than just how much work experience you have and your GMAT score. We're going to be looking at your academic record. We're going to be looking at if you're looking to make a major career change or not, or looking to step up to the next level in your current career path. Certainly the latter is a little bit easier to do as a more experienced candidate, whereas somebody that has a great deal of work experience may not be a best fit for, say, a leadership development program where a company is looking to kind of develop you into that general manager role. So, but it depends. I mean, there's certain schools that very much value seasoned work profile and are not going to be intimidated by someone that has a lot of work experience, but definitely pay attention to like the middle 80% range for GMAT, for GPA, for years of experience. For some of those broad-based profile factors, most schools will give you not just an average but a middle 80%, and that's a good indicator. You want to be in the middle 80% for several of those profile factors if at all possible, or certainly above it would be fine. But if you find yourself consistently as an outlier, you need to ask yourself the question of whether or not you're targeting the right schools, or if there might be other schools that are a better fit for you, or if you feel that you truly are targeting the right schools, well, how are you going to stand out in a good way? Because again, schools are always looking for the balance, and it's a very yin-yang sort of balance in terms of diversity versus uniformity. And we want to see a combination of diversity and uniformity when it comes to career outcomes, when it comes to academic backgrounds, when it comes to types of experiences. Again, it's a very delicate balance in terms of what's the right amount that adds value without making it so disparate that students don't find the value in that the student mix. So don't obsess too much on the quantitative factors of your candidacy. I know it's very easy to compare those factors. Certainly the schools will look at it. It's probably the very beginning of the assessment, but we're going to look a lot at everything else and dig a heck of a lot deeper when we're looking at who we're going to be admitting to the program. So the next question, is there leeway to twist a low GMAT score into a factor that can be overlooked, any case you know of? Of course, if you look at our middle 80% profile, there are 10% of our students that are below our middle 80%. So there are absolutely students that have strong other factors that get admitted with a low GMAT. So what are those? Great work experience is one of them. A strong undergraduate record is another one, because quite frankly, you may not be the best standardized test taker, but we need to know that you can handle the academic rigor of our program. Our retention and graduation rates are very, very, very high for a top school, and so we don't want to, put you in jeopardy of changing that by admitting somebody with a low academic profile. And so we do want to make sure that both quantitatively as well as overall that you're going to be able to handle the rigor of the program, and that's not going to then become a distraction for you on your job search, because the job search is going to take a considerable amount of effort as well, and time and investment, and we don't want you to feel like you're stretching yourself too thin and compromising on one or the other because of your academic capabilities. We certainly have plenty of examples of candidates over the years that have done phenomenally well in our programs, both career-wise and academically, with a lower GMAT. And so we will dig very deep into your academic record, not just your cumulative GPA, but grades in specific classes that might be business or math oriented that can show your academic capabilities. And again, we're going to look at how closely aligned are your career background to your career plans, and what other unique values would you bring to the program, what unique strengths, differences would you bring. And that might be a case where a candidate brings some very unique things, life experiences, professional experiences that we think we just can't pass, that we just have to have in our program, even if the student has a lower GMAT score. So there's absolutely examples of it. You, again, need to find some schools where you will be a fit even if your GMAT score is a little bit lower than the average or lower than the middle 80%, but don't apply to all schools where you're the bottom 10%. That's probably not realistic. You need to find a mix of schools where somewhere you're going to be, in the middle of the pack, and somewhere you may be a little bit more of a stretch, and finding that unique balance, but still feeling like you're targeting schools that are going to add a lot of value to you as a candidate is going to be important. By my clock, it is 1:00 p.m. I want to be mindful to your time and appreciative of what you've just invested over the past hour with me. I realize we didn't get to quite all the questions, so by all means, feel free to shoot me an email if you would like to talk further. You can go to the Simon Business School website. My contact information is listed there. Or if you send an email to admissions@simon.rochester.edu and put it to my attention, I'd be happy to be a resource for you, not only in your admissions process, but more specifically as you consider the Simon Business School. We have a phenomenal business program and a great deal to offer to MBA candidates, and we look forward to hearing from you if you're interested in talking more. Good luck with your plans for business school, and have a great afternoon.